This is the Ray Lucia Show.
Coming to the best for the answers here.
The one show that helps you make better money moves. The program all about your money, your business, and your life.
You guys talk about a lot of really good information that even I can understand.
Call Ray now at 844-RAY-SHOW, 844-RAY-SHOW. This is the Ray Lucia Show.
Thank you, and welcome to the one talk show in America that helps you make better money moves. The program all about your money, your business, and your life. It's the Ray Lucia Show. That would be me, along with my sidekick, Johnny Dean, here to help you out this hour of Money Power. If you'd like to jump on board, 844-RAY-SHOW is the number, 844-729-7469. The call is free. The advice always priceless on this radio program. Emails at raylucia.com, RAYLUCIA.com. Johnny Dean, how you doing, buddy?
I'm all right. I was looking through some of these questions that we had from folks, and there was one, I can't find it, but it had to do with 401k allocation in a 401k. And if I can find it, I think it's something maybe we can talk about a little bit later on this hour.
Well, it's funny because I am going to talk about asset allocation this hour, solving the biggest risk in what's the biggest risk in retirement?
You talking about money-wise? It could be anything. I would suggest running out.
Well, I guess David Braun, the investment advisor representative from David Braun Financial, says it's longevity.
Okay,
living
that's
too long. I've studied this, as you know.
Yeah.
And in fact, I read it was about 40 pages this morning. It was an older article, a couple years, but they were going through all of these different things that are going on in medicine, and it just blows me away. I mean, I'm learning about telomeres. Yeah.
That's the thing that gives a cell its life.
And then I learned about jellyfish.
Those are the things that swim under the ocean.
And sting the heck out of you.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
There's all kinds of stuff going on. Anyway, life expectancy grows with age. I've talked about this before. I have data to prove it. But let's start today with this thing, and you bring it up, asset allocation. You know, John, when we talk about asset allocation, we're talking about different percentages.
Yeah.
But my question to our audience is, a percentage of what? Check this out, folks. Sit back, relax. It is the Ray Revolution. So a fellow by the name of Barry Wasserman, who is actually a mental health professional, a retired mental health professional, and a volunteer retirement counselor.
A volunteer retirement counselor, but a mental health professional.
Yeah. And he's brilliant, actually, because what he wrote, asset allocation, a percentage of what, is so spot on, because when you talk to your advisor, the advisor looks at your brokerage statement and it shows a nice little pie chart, and they say, well, your asset allocation is messed up, or whatever they say. Right. I want to read from this, because I have been in this situation dozens of times over my lengthy former career. Here goes. An investor's allocation to stocks and bonds is often the most consequential investment decision he or she will make. But the practice of translating investment risk into a stock and bond ratio is fraught with misunderstanding. He goes on, this is due in part to the impact of taxes on tax-deferred accounts, usually forgotten, by the way, in the asset allocation discussion.
Boy, isn't it, though?
But even more so to assets and liabilities not shown in the typical investment statement. Put another way, if I say I have 40% in stocks, I'm describing the numerator of a fraction. But what I haven't said and often haven't considered is the denominator. To explain, let's consider a 60-year-old single retired female who has a brokerage statement showing $1 million.
Nice.
$400,000 in global stock index funds held in a taxable account, and $600,000 in short-term treasury bonds held in a tax-deferred IRA. Got that?
I got it.
You're writing
Yep.
it down?
I've got it up here.
Okay, good. Her plan, which appears reasonable given her income and expenses, is to supplement her retirement income solely through withdrawals from her IRA while leaving the stock fund held in a taxable account untouched so that she can pass it on to her heirs with a stepped-up tax basis. So she
Okay,
wants to,
yeah.
this is all reasonable stuff,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so what is her stock bond allocation? Well, it's 40% stock, 60% bond.
Sounds like that old 100 minus your age thing.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yes,
we'll
everybody
talk
should
about
have
that later.
Every 60-year-old needs the same allocation.
All right, see, so the allocation seems okay, doesn't it? However, she goes on, or he goes on, talking about her. However, if one discounts the $600,000 of tax-deferred bonds at their after-tax value, assuming, say, a 33% combined federal and state income tax, she really only has $400,000, not $600,000 in bonds.
Oh, so that's 400 and 400.
So now it's a 50-50 mix, isn't it?
It is.
Making her portfolio appear more risky.
Wow.
We move on. So this woman then decides to use $400,000 of her bond assets to buy a single premium immediate annuity, more commonly known as a
SPIA.
SPIA.
And didn't we talk about those at
all
one
the
point?
time we
Yes.
talk about them. Her next statement correctly reports a reduced total portfolio of $600,000 with the same $400,000 in stocks, but now $200,000 in bonds. The statement now reports her asset mix to be a seemingly more aggressive 67-33% mix. All of a sudden, she's starting to get nervous because her advisor is saying, man, you've got a risky asset allocation for somebody that's retired.
67, in this case, 67% stock and 33%
You got
fixed
it.
income.
We'll move on. If the post-annuity calculation in the last example were adjusted to its after-tax value, her $400,000 of stocks in the taxable account would remain the same, while her $200,000 in tax-deferred bonds would be valued at only $134,000. That takes her up to a 75-25 mix.
Which is funny because in her account, it's still a 40-60.
That's right.
I mean,
her asset allocation and her risk has not changed a lick, except her advisors is freaking out right now because this is a retiring person.
And making her freak out. Well, I think she just did retire, right? She's 60.
Yeah, she then decides to withdraw $150,000 of the remaining $200,000 of bonds held in her IRA account to pay off her mortgage balance of $100,000. $50,000 of that, of course, goes to pay the taxes. So on her next statement, her total portfolio appears further reduced to $450,000, still with $400,000 in stocks. That puts her at a 90-10 asset allocation.
Okay, I can follow this. I'm listening very carefully. We may have to summarize this.
Well,
but
the summary is easy.
I mean, man.
You had a 40-60 allocation, which went to a 50-50 allocation, which went to a 67-33 allocation, which went to a 75-25 allocation, which went to a 90-10 allocation, and nothing about risk changed in her portfolio.
I mean, this Wasserman guy sat around and thought of this stuff?
He thought of this stuff, but the reason that I bring it up is I've been in this situation many times for a number of different reasons. Usually I talk about this in the context of how many people have all of their money sitting in one brokerage firm with one brokerage statement and one pretty pie chart. Looking it up in my brain, nobody. Nobody, because you might have a 401k plan with your company, and they send you a nice pretty pie chart every quarter.
Sure.
And then you got a Schwab account or a TD Ameritrade account or an account with Merrill or an account with your bank or who knows what, and they're not talking to each other. This is why when we talk about real financial planning and real financial planners, they would have what we call the ability to aggregate all of your accounts under one roof and give you one pie chart, even though you may have assets held in different localities. And this way, you don't get this baloney of a misinterpretation of what your asset allocation is. So talk to your broker, financial planner, financial advisor, your team about aggregating accounts and then doing the real job of asset allocation.
Maybe putting all the information in one central storage area.
Absolutely, that's what you can do. If you want to learn more about that, give us a call or go to raylucia.com, click on the Ask Ray button. Now stick around as we're back with more. Hey, welcome back, folks. This is the Ray Lucia Show, helping you to make better money moves, maybe the best money moves. 844-RAY-SHOW if you want to chat. Emails at raylucia.com, RAYLUCIA.com. Click on the Ask Ray button. We've been getting a lot of emails in, John.
Well, we have. We'll get to some of those toward the end of the hour. We had a question, though, off the air, and they didn't want to hold on or they were shy or whatever. But,
Come on.
But it was quick.
What do they think, we're going to bite?
Actually, we should make a policy. If you call, you're going to go on the air.
Yeah, okay.
All right. But this one notwithstanding.
Did they give a name? Did they give you a name?
Didn't get a name. I'm sorry. I had like 3 minutes in the break. It was rushed into me. Ask you to explain. You had in the last segment talked about a 60-year-old single female retired, or maybe
retiring.
Yes,
or
retiring. She's got $1 million, nice nest egg. 40% of it in equities,
yeah, stocks.
60% in fixed income, bond, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in about 6 or 7 minutes, you had talked about her advisor looking at her portfolio as actually being 75% stock and 25% bond, or ultimately 90% stock and 10% bond. They asked, could you please clarify what you were talking about?
Because nothing changed as far as the asset allocation. First of all, you have to look at your whole portfolio and what is it worth net after taxes, because she's taking money out of a retirement account to live on. Well, you can't take out 100 cents. Well, you take out 100 cents on the dollar, but it's only worth 67 cents by the time it gets to your wallet, right?
Right. Every dollar I take out, I could keep 67 cents.
So if you had the 40% of stocks sitting in a taxable account and you're going to leave that alone until you die, the amount of tax that you pay on that is negligible, if any, depending on your tax bracket.
Again, this is all personal money that we're talking about.
The stock market was personal money. Right. The bond market, the $600,000 in bonds, was IRA.
Right.
So he was obviously making a point and exaggerating the point to make a point.
Of course.
But I think the key here, there's a couple of keys. One is this asset allocation pie chart that you get on your brokerage statement. When you're reviewing that with your spouse, with your advisory team, your CPA or whatever, they look at that and they cast their own impression of what your finances look like. All right? Many times they look at it all in gross dollars, not in net dollars, right? What is it worth to you from a spending standpoint? That's one. The other thing is, as I mentioned just before the break, almost nobody has all of their money in one 401k. They might have a 401k over here, an IRA over there, a brokerage account somewhere else. And I was talking about the value of an advisor that can bring aggregation, automatic aggregation of all of your accounts. We have the technology today. Does your advisor offer that service to you? That's all. Because then you could press a button and get the pie chart, but you still have to do some mental acrobatics because of the tax situation. But I think the point that this fellow Barry Wasserman was making is you could make changes in your portfolio that distort what your asset allocation looks like on paper, but it doesn't really change the level of risk in the portfolio. And many times advisors will jump to a false conclusion that you're very risky, even though you are not. You haven't changed your asset allocation a lick. For example, if you pull money out of your retirement account and pay off your home, the net tax thing is the same. You got to pay tax on that money sometime anyway. So put that on the back burner. You paid off your home, and you spent bond money to pay off your home. Now, isn't a home tantamount to a reverse bond?
You are now the bond. When you have a mortgage, you're the bond issuer.
That's right.
You're not the bond holder. It's the
You're
opposite.
making a payment on your mortgage, which is like making a payment on a bond. So if you paid the mortgage off, it's tantamount to you getting to retain that payment like earning interest. So taking money out of a bond and paying off your mortgage did not necessarily increase the risk in your portfolio. In reality, it probably decreased it somewhat because you always have reverse mortgage opportunities and so forth. But from a pure asset allocation standpoint, the amount of stock in your portfolio does not necessarily overweight you in stock. And the mere impression of looking at one's portfolio from that perspective might distort how they feel about the level of risk that you're taking. That's the point.
The advisor might see a distorted view. Sort of a close-up view, but if you back it up, the advisor may not know. You know, they may only think you have this one 401k. And maybe you didn't tell them, or you forgot that you got an IRA with $500,000 sitting in it, and stock allocation or something like that.
Hard to believe that an advisor would not ask that question, John. But I guess
they may have. But I've been told many times that people say, "Oh wait, I forgot I had this old 401k with 50 grand in it. I totally forgot."
Well, I have had
that.
Oh,
the 403b. My wife, she's had this old 403. In a Roth.
Yeah, I've said to individuals before, keep talking, because the more you talk, the better things sound.
Well, exactly. I mean, it can happen. It's just people don't pay attention like that. So.
All right, next up on the docket, we've had this conversation before, folks, and you should have it once again with your advisor. But so many people believe that dollar cost averaging, making the decision to invest incrementally, is a safer bet, especially after the market's done so well, right?
You mean as opposed to
just putting money in lump sum?
That's a big decision people have to make.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a wrong answer here, but a while back Ben Carlson wrote about this, quoting a study that I've talked about on the air many times, this Vanguard study. And here's what he had to say. Research from Vanguard shows that most of the time investors would do best by investing a lump sum.
Research has said this?
Research has said it. It compared performance of an immediate lump sum over a year against 12 monthly purchases spaced out over the course of a year. The lump sum beat dollar cost averaging about 2/3 of the time, which kind of makes sense because about 70% of the time the market's going up. So if the market's going up 70% of the time, about 70% of the time you're going to be making the wrong decision when you dollar cost average.
But they said a 1 year period. Is this different 1 year periods they looked at?
They looked at 3 years too in this study, and the 3-year number was even better for the lump sum, as you can imagine. The lump sum beat dollar cost averaging about 2/3 of the time. On average, the lump sum beat DCA by an average of 1.5% to 2.4%, depending on the country. They looked at the U.S., UK, and Australia. The results were even more pronounced for longer time horizons, which answers the question you just asked, Mr. John D.
Yes.
Over the course of 1 year, that's pretty significant. 1.5% to 2.4%.
I wouldn't expect it to be that much. I mean, if you did this, obviously it's on average. So if you'd done it in 2007, it'd be a different answer than if you'd done it in 2009 or whatever.
Yeah, well, I would point out, and that's an excellent point, that obviously when markets are valued high, the scale would be tilted a little bit more toward dollar cost averaging, although not that much. When we come back, I'll give you the rest of the data.
Yeah, please.
But it's interesting stuff because I get this question all the time when markets are trading at a CAPE that's north of 25, which ours is way north of that right now. Okay, stick around, folks. There's a lot more coming your way. This is why you tune in to the Ray Lucia Show. We'll be back. It is the program all about your money, your business, and your life. Ray Lucia here, along with Johnny Dean, tackling your money questions, making mincemeat out of them. That's coming up in just a bit during the email segment. If you'd like to email us right now, I've got my handy-dandy phone over here. There it is. And when I get them on my cell phone, I go right to them, John.
Well, because it flashes up. And we'll answer some of these questions coming up. As you said, it'll be in the next segment. Now, I know we want to move on. I don't like to keep carrying stuff over. But you had talked before the break about you have a lump sum of money from somewhere, wherever it is. You want to invest it somehow. You want to put it into something. But the markets they're high, they're low. So the research says, well, the question was, do you take a lump sum and just dump it all in the market and let it go from there, hope it goes up? Or do you do it in segments? Do you divide it up into 12 segments and dollar cost average in over the year? The research said it's better to put about 2/3 of the time, something like that, to put the lump sum in.
Right.
Because the markets are going up like 2/3, 3/4 of the time. All right. Somebody might look at that and say, well, I mean, all right, isn't this sort of a market timing play now? Because, I want to be right. The markets have been high. They've been going up since 2009. I mean, the last quarter notwithstanding, for the most part.
I'm chuckling because I was flashing back to when I was a young broker. This is many years ago. And I did that same thing. The market, I forget the exact years, but it was back in the 80s somewhere. And the market had gone up for like 3 or 4 years in a row. Things were looking really, really good. And this doctor had a bunch of money, and it was all in cash. And I said, well, we need to get some of this in the market, but let's dollar cost average it in, like over the next 2 or 3 years. And he thought that was a genius plan. And 1 year later, I lost the client because the market had gone up some 20 or 30%.
And he should have been all in.
And he called me up and he said, well, how much is in the market? Well, it was 1/30.
About a third of it.
About a third of the money's invested, 2/3 earning squat, and he pulled his money. And I learned a lesson the hard way. And that's when I first came up with, if you don't know what to do, then put about half and half, because then you can look your client in the eye, or if it's just you can say, you know what, I'm going to be at least 50% right instead of 100% wrong. So you bring up the fact that valuations are high right now. The market's gone up for 10 years. Everything looks like, the prices are overvalued and all that stuff. Still, I would take at least half of it and just hold my nose and go in. Right. And then the other, I'd probably consider dollar cost averaging over the course of a year. But the only reason is I'm not sure where the markets are going from here. It seems like they still have some legs, but no one knows for certain. So I'd rather be 50% right than 100% wrong.
Yeah, because the minute if you had dumped on that client all of it in and said we're going all in.
Oh yeah, I'd have lost my short.
The market would have tanked.
I'd have lost them in 2 months instead of 12.
Exactly. At least you had them for 12 months. So you can't predict it. So that's why it's not a market timing thing, but it's the old 50-50 rule.
It's not. Okay, yet another study that's come out on market timing that says, guess what? It doesn't work. I read some really interesting stuff on this yesterday that I'll share at a later date because the study was very complex. But the end result was market timing still doesn't work.
Well, certainly not over the long haul.
Nonetheless, this is research from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College. The researchers looked at target date funds, which are those funds that you get in your 401k that are designed to reduce risk as you change your age. And you brought this up earlier, the 110 minus your age and all that stuff.
100 minus your age. You're 70 years old, every 70-year-old should have 30% in their stock. Because they're all the same.
Yeah, and I've hated that for many years. So here's what Michael Douglas, really Michael Douglas? Oh, I don't know.
I remember him.
I do too. As 2060 gets closer, they're looking at a 2060 fund and a 2025 fund. The 2025 target date fund is 65% stock and 35% bonds, and the 2060 fund is 90% stock and 10% bond. Obviously, somebody retiring in 2060 could be more aggressive.
I would hope so.
So
Should be.
Here's what they said. The researchers found that target date funds that deviated from the glide path. Now, there are certain funds that stick to the glide path religiously, but many of them give the money manager the latitude to go ahead and make some bets, which is tantamount to timing the market. Instead of sticking with the declining equity glide path, which remind me to talk about at another date because that's a bunch of baloney too. But the declining equity glide path, they stick with it. But maybe they say, you know what? Valuations are low. I think I'm going to pick this stock, or I like Google now, and I like Facebook that's gotten beaten up, and they make some value judgment. So the researchers found that target date funds that deviated from the glide path underperformed their peers by 14.1 basis points. Now that's not much, but it's still underperformance. If you'd invested for 30 years in two funds, one of which underperformed by just 14 basis points annually, you'd see a total difference of about 3.8% in your overall return. But the difference was statistically significant according to this. Now, we also have to be reminded of the Dalbar study. The Dalbar study, the quantitative analysis of investor behavior. Remember that one?
Yeah.
The QAIB.
A way back.
Well, they've been doing it for 30 years. And I used to pay for it. Now I'm using year or two old data because it doesn't matter that much to me because the data says the same thing
always,
every single year. And that is the S&P 500 earns X and you, the investor, earn something less than X. If you go to the 2016 QAIB study, the S&P 500 earned 1.38%. The average equity mutual fund investor earned minus 2.28%. If you looked at 1996 through 2015, so what is that, 20 years, the S&P 500 earned 8.19%. The average equity mutual fund investor earned 4.67%. So what's the point? The point is whether it's your money manager attempting to time the market by doing what they did in these target date funds, although rare, or whether it's you trying to guess which way the market is going, you will underperform buying and holding. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to take, especially those that listen to radio programs like this one, where people are telling you they're going to get you in and out of the market. This other more sophisticated study showed, and I think I'll talk about this in the next day or so, but this study showed that if you pick the best day versus the worst day, you still ended up with like 80% of whatever the market returns were. It's pretty amazing when you think about how resilient the markets are over time.
Time is the key, Ray. Time is the key. We talk about 15 years in the markets. If you need the money 5 years from now, 8 years from now, maybe 10 years from now.
But there's something that goes along with that, John, and that is this discipline because of the inherent biases that we all have. Our brains, unfortunately, are hardwired to head for the hills the first time that we're afraid of the bear coming out of the woods.
Well, it's as soon as everybody else starts to going. It's the
herd
mentality that keeps you safe with the group. Go where the group is going. So when the group starts to go, everybody, whether there's danger or not, they just start to go that way. It's a survival.
Yeah, but my problem is I can't outrun you, so the bear is going to get me.
Well, that's called natural selection, which we'll get to another time.
How about adverse selection? I like that one better.
All right, well, we can talk about either one.
That's where the bear passes me up and says I don't like Italian food.
Yeah, but there's more meat on that one, you see?
There is a little more meat on this one, but you know what? I've got a couple of stories to tell you, but I can't tell them on the air.
Okay, well.
The other thing that I'm reminded of is the study that was done by Terrence O'Dean and Brad Barber.
Yeah, we've talked about this one a lot.
The Taiwanese study. They found that the average trader lost 0.25% of their portfolio daily So if you were trading your account, you were losing. And by the way, this was an exhaustive study. If I recall the number, it was 66,000 households trading stocks on the Taiwanese exchange.
Wow.
And they lost a quarter of their portfolio daily, but here's the one that's more compelling. 93% of them quit trading, day trading, within 5 years. What does that tell you about the likelihood of success in being a trader, in being a market timer? The next time you're driving around on the weekend and you hear one of these shows that are going to make you rich, get you rich quick, think about that. Or move to Taiwan. We'll take a quick break, come back with your emails. It's the Ray Lucia Show. And welcome back. This is the Ray Lucia Show, helping you to make better money moves. It's email time, so hit it, fellas. Let's get it on. There we go.
They keep telling me to wait, but I'm not going to wait. I refuse. We can't wait. We've got less than like 8 minutes here. Alex, besides, has a question here that I think we need to get to right away.
Alrighty.
Alex says, I have not been doing very well with the bond funds in my portfolio. I've heard you speak on purchasing individual bonds, fixed and index annuities, and something called a MYGA. Didn't we talk about that yesterday or something?
I don't know if we talked about it yesterday, but I have talked about all of those, all of the above several times.
All right,
yes.
I don't know if we have all the information, but Alex says, what should I do?
Okay, Alex. Well, first off, if you're reinvesting the dividends inside your bond fund, it's probably not going to be as bad as you think, because of this thing called dollar cost averaging. So when a fund is going down in value, as bond funds do when interest rates go up, remember, we had a pretty wicked year for interest rates. It's stabilized a little bit now, but over the last year, 18 months, rates have gone up quite substantially, and most bond funds have gotten hit pretty hard. So if you're dollar cost averaging back in, it doesn't bother me all that much. Now, I have discussed bond alternatives, and while I wouldn't take 100% of my bonds out of the mix, I would consider one of the above mentioned vehicles. You mentioned, or I've mentioned, fixed annuity contracts. A traditional fixed annuity contract is an insurance company's version of, say, a certificate of deposit without FDIC insurance, but with state guarantee fund insurance of sorts. And many times you're going to get a better rate. The MYGA would be an example of that. I was looking at MYGA rates a week or two ago, so you can't quote me on this because they change on a daily basis, but I believe I saw a 5-year MYGA, that's a multi-year guaranteed annuity contract. That's what MYGA stands for. At 4.1% over a 5-year period.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. I think the 3-year CDs were in the 3% range. So there you go. You get 1% better yield. You have almost the same amount of safety. I dare say it would be safe enough for me to put my money in if it's with a reasonably rated insurance company. So yes, the index annuity is a little more complicated product. I happen to like it very much because, again, if stocks go up or an index goes up 71% of the time, I think the stats are, that means that 7 years out of 10, you're going to be making money in a fixed indexed annuity. And in the years where the index goes down, you get credited not with a negative return, but with a zero.
Yeah, and then the new year, when the next year starts, you start at that
lower
point to go forward.
Exactly right.
So it's not like you have to get back to wherever the market was.
Now, these are complex instruments, and they're not going to make you rich. Anybody that says in any kind of a fixed income investment, you're going to do double digits, I think they're smoking crack. I mean, seriously. But a fixed indexed annuity, if you're forecasting a 3 to 5% return, that's reasonable. In a MYGA, the MYGA is going to tell you exactly what the rate of return is. There's no fluctuation in it. If it's a regular fixed annuity, the interest rate may change every single year, which in a rising interest rate environment may be better than a bond. Now, we all know that if you put your money into, say, treasuries, a 5-year treasury, if interest rates go up 1%, you're likely to lose somewhere in the vicinity of 5% of your principal. So if a 5-year treasury pays 3 and interest rates go up 1%, you will have had a -2 for the year. That's the bad news. But if you're reinvesting the dividends, then that next year you're reinvesting at rates that are now 4%, not 3%. So over time you'll get your money back. But I will say this, if interest rates go up about 2 percentage points, it may take you 5 to 7 years to get back all your money. So I think there are alternatives for those individuals that A, are looking to spend some of this money at some point, because, John, we don't want to reverse dollar cost average out of bond funds either.
No, you said lose money. I mean, that's if you sell it.
If you sell it.
Treasury. You get your stated interest rate, but yeah.
Yeah, but if it's a Treasury fund,
well, if it's a Treasury fund, then
I think he said bond funds, right?
He said, his bond funds. He asked you about individual bonds.
Okay, if you're buying individual bonds, you have to hold them until they mature in order to get all your money back, and then you will get all your money back. But if you get out early, you're likely going to lose money in a rising interest rate environment.
Now, who would consider, say, CDs or bonds, especially in a low interest rate environment, when for nothing else you can get a higher interest rate on something like, maybe a fixed annuity product?
Well, the problem with the fixed annuity product is it comes with a pretty wicked surrender penalty.
Well,
now,
so does a CD, doesn't it? I mean,
well, the CD surrender charge is usually 6 months worth of interest. That's not that much by comparison. So the question is, if you are going to hold the investment until it matures, which if you're buying a bond, you sort of have to, then because the surrender charge is the liquidity value when you sell out.
Because I wouldn't give it up if interest rates went down. I'd only give it up if the interest rates went up because I want something better.
Well, but the problem with that is you're going to lose money when
exactly
you do
right.
it. So your point is well taken. The surrender penalty is there either way, isn't it?
I see it as there either way.
The fixed index annuity does give you liquidity, though. You can take 10% out, or the fixed, it doesn't have to be an index, but the fixed annuity, which will pay you maybe a little bit better rate of return, gives you access to your capital without this interest rate risk of, say, 10% if you needed some money.
See, but I went into this thinking a 3-year CD, 3-year fixed annuity, 5-year CD, 5-year CD. I don't need it for 5 years, all right? My goal is to leave it in there.
Then you're better off with the annuity. It's just, it's a game, John. People just don't understand. Do we have another one, or are we running out of time? You beat that one to death, didn't you?
Well, Orlando has a question on IUL. Can we hold it? Can we do it like?
Is Dawn after that? Tony?
We should have had a Tony.
Tony, then Orlando, and
I don't have a single Tony. Orlando. You want to talk about dating yourself? Ask anybody under the age of 45 if they have any idea what that reference is.
Tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree.
And knock 3 times on the ceiling if you want me. Twice on the pipe, clang, clang.
Clang, clang.
If you
the answer is
no. No, play another song.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you so much, folks. If you want to email me, go to raylucia.com, RAYLUCIA.com. Click on the Ask Ray button, email me, and we won't take a whole segment on your email. In the meantime, God bless. Make it a great day. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Ray Lucia Show, bringing you the best in money information, answering questions about your biggest financial challenges, talking about your money, your business, and your life. Ray Lucia is not a registered representative of or affiliated with any securities brokerage or investment advisory firm. The views and opinions expressed by Ray and his guests are not necessarily those of this station or its sponsors and should not be construed as legal, tax, or investment advice. You should always consult with the appropriate advisors before making any financial decisions. Ray is available to take your questions online at raylucia.com. This is The Ray Lucia Show.
Coming to the best for the answers here.
The one show that helps you make better money moves. The program all about your money, your business, and your life.
You guys talk about a lot of really good information that even I can understand.
Call Ray now at 844-RAY-SHOW, 844-RAY-SHOW. This is The Ray Lucia Show.
Very much. Thank you, and welcome to the one talk show in America that helps you make better money moves. It is the Ray program, along with Johnny Dean. It's the show all about your money, John, your business, and what life you have left.
I don't have, hey, listen, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, I got another 45 years.
Oh, I think you do. We're going to talk about that as a life expectancy at birth. When we do these calculations, looking at life expectancy at birth, making a huge mistake, a humongous mistake. And so many people say, well, life expectancy is age 79. Well, that's if you're being born today. But you're not. You're
I did that.
50-year-old man.
I'm an early 60s model. You're even before that. You can't even get parts for me anymore, or you for that matter.
I'm a Ford Fairlane.
Wow. Better than the Edsel.
Yeah, way
would
better
say.
than the Edsel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true when they say there's the average person's going to live to age 79, 78, or whatever. They're talking about somebody born today. However, life expectancies have been extended. You know, when I was born, my life expectancy might have been 68 or 69. I don't know what it was, but that may have been 70, 71 for a man, something like that, or male. Now it's probably something closer to the late 70s on average, simply because of medical technology.
I read this morning, I believe it was in Japan, a little Japanese baby born today is likely to live to 107. That's what I read.
107?
107. That's what they said. Now, these may be these retirement researchers that tell you can't eat but 300 calories a day and all that stuff.
Right.
But I think it is important that we discuss what your life expectancy may be, because remember, these life expectancy rates, etc., are based on 50% probabilities. That means the other 50% could live longer.
Well, they do live longer.
They do live longer.
Yeah,
so we'll talk about that. Yeah, I can discuss that. The other thing I wanted to bring up, because we have an email you were telling me during the break that somebody was asking about IUL.
IUL, which is Indexed Universal Life, and I know there are some pundits out there going, did I hear the permanent cash value type life insurance being discussed?
It's actually not a bad product at all. I can talk about that. But the reason I bring it up is I was reading from an actuary, Steve Vernon, who's a pretty bright guy, and he wrote about losing a spouse as the hardest thing for married couples. So I might get a chance to talk about that in the context of this Index Universal Life, because so many people say, well, I'll just buy term insurance and invest the rest, and you and I have discussed that many times on this and other programs. So maybe we can talk about what Steve Vernon has to say about loss of a spouse and the psychology of retirement income satisfaction. I can't get no satisfaction. And a whole bunch more. Solving the biggest risk in retirement. That's another biggie.
The biggest, well, I think that all goes back to living a long time.
It does. So these things are related.
Yeah, the risk, I mean, living a long time is better than the alternative, of course, but the risk is that the money isn't going to last as long.
Well, but the combination, remember we talked the other day about the combination of a permanent life insurance policy and some kind of annuitized portfolio. It doesn't have to be an annuity. And I think this is where people get messed up. They think whenever you talk about annuitized income, I was reading, it's here somewhere, Dr. Moshe Milevsky, whom we've had on this program from this very studio once upon a time.
He has a better word for it.
He's got all kinds of words. I'll have to find it. What did Moshe Milevsky have to say about this?
I think it's maybe more accurate, pensionized income, which is sort of the same thing.
Yeah, you've got a pretty daggone good memory there, boy.
I remember him. He was outstanding.
He is outstanding. I've had breakfast with him, actually. He's a very, very smart guy. And I bought. We'll take a break, come back with more. We got lots to talk about, so don't go away.
This is the Ray Lucia Show,
Coming to the best for the answers here.
the one show that helps you make better money moves. The program all about your money, your business, and your life.
You guys talk about a lot of really good information that even I can understand.
Call Ray now at 844-RAY-SHOW, 844-RAY-SHOW. This is the Ray Lucia Show.
Thank you, and welcome to the one talk show in America that helps you make better money moves. The program all about your money, your business, and your life. And a guy with a long life expectancy in the house, Johnny Dean. How's your life?
What life? I might have a lot, but how can I have a long life expectancy and no life at the same time?
That's why you have a long life expectancy. It's God punishing you.
Punishing me? I like to be busy. I'm
No,
a
I do
busy
too.
guy.
You are.
Idle hands and all that stuff. That's not my style.
Are you getting ready for a big podcast where you bring your keyboard in and we do some songs?
Yeah, I got the fingers warmed up and all
Okay.
that stuff. So
We'll keep you posted on that,
We'll-
folks,
we'll
because
let
we
you
got a
know.
lot of, we got our chops down.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Things that just there's enough time in the hour to get to.
Yeah, so on that subject, we will get to this life expectancy thing. Also, Steve Vernon wrote not too long about the losing a spouse being the hardest thing for married people. Obviously, that is true, and so many people don't realize the risks associated with that. Financial risks. Obviously, the emotional risks are beyond even imagination, but the financial risks are also there, and a lot of people don't plan for that, and it is inevitable. Usually, the woman will last longer than us men, John.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of other problems associated with that too.
Lots and lots of them. Solving the biggest risk in retirement, this whole idea of longevity. But we start today with life expectancy growing with age. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the life expectancy tables that you utilize, that the actuaries give us, is really going to impact how long you might live, which would be true if we were having this discussion and you were like 3 or 4 weeks old. But we're having this discussion and you're 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever, and your life expectancy will grow with age. Sit back, folks. Relax. It's the Ray Revolution!
Almost there. Right there, that's good.
Wade Fowle wrote about this a while back. It's good stuff, and it's something that everybody needs to be cognizant of. Here's what he said, and he's got an illustration. You all can't see it, but Johnny Dean can, and the illustration looks something like that, John. And
Well,
there's
yes,
two-
if you're listening on the radio, you can't
Yeah.
see it, but it looks like an obtuse triangle.
Yeah, okay.
How's that?
Uh-huh.
An obtuse angle, maybe.
An obtuse angle is very, very good. So what he says is, when you're using median life expectancies, there's a 50% probability that you'd live past that age of life expectancy. So if a person's 65 years old, they have a 50% chance of living 21.85 more years to right about age 87, he says. But there's also a 50% chance you could live longer than that. So there's this line that you saw, that one line that was steep, that was taking you from 65 to 87 and you're dead. And then there was a line that sort of curved out.
Starting from the same point. Yes.
Exactly. And that said, well, you know what? You also, if you make it, say, to age 87, there's a 50% chance you're going to make it to 90. And if you make it to 90, there's a 50% chance you're going to make it to 95, and so forth. So this is why when we get to the greatest risk that retirees and pre-retirees must face, it's the mere fact that you don't know when you're gonna kick the bucket. And therefore it makes planning very, very critical, because when we go back to these 4% rules, the Bill Benjamin 4% rule, they have to use a worst case scenario, don't they? Because they have to make the assumption that you're going to outlive your life expectancy, therefore be more conservative with their assumptions. so that they look at 1,000 different scenarios, and in 4 or 5 of them you run out of money. So they say, whoa, we got to be careful. We got to make sure we're not going to run out of money. So here is what Faust said about this. This, he says, explains why it's a big mistake to use life expectancies at birth when thinking about how long one will live in their retirement. Once one has reached their retirement age, they should live much longer than their life expectancy at birth because they were not a part of the population that died before the retirement age. Sounds pretty logical to me. If you made it to the age of 87 and you're still alive, you're looking in the mirror and you say, you know what? I'm going to make it another X number of years, right?
Well, okay, think about it this way. I like to look at it this way. In 1900, I think the average, the life expectancy was somewhere around 63, 64.
45, I think, in 19. Maybe it was a little bit more than that, but it wasn't much.
It was something like that. Maybe 60 something, 63, something like that. All right, so obviously a lot of people died off early. But those who made it to 63, 64, 65 had, because there was not much medical care and all that other stuff, they had really good genes that kept them alive. So that 65-year-old oftentimes made it all the way to 90. You had people back then living to be 90, 95, in spite of the fact that there wasn't any medical care. They just had good genes. They had inherited good stuff. So you can see this again. It still holds true today. If you're going to make it to age 80 or 85, there's a good chance that you're going to make it another 5 years, 10 years.
There's a good chance. My dad, who is 93 and a half, almost 94 years old, will likely make it another, according to the odds, 5 years.
Those are the odds. That's the odds makers.
Well, there's a 50% chance that he could make it another 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that being said, how do you plan for a lifetime of income? So now we go back to solving the biggest risk in retirement, which I teased in the last hour, I believe, but who knows when this might air. But it's very interesting because this fellow, David Braun, wrote, when it comes to financially preparing for retirement, of course, we may have many risks to address. And we've covered all of these from time to time on the show for sure, such as long-term care risk, market risk, of course, withdrawal rate risk, sequence of returns risk, mortality risk, inflation risk, deflation risk, regulatory risk, fluctuating tax risk. Health risks in particular can be life-changing as they affect your memory, mobility, and basic functions such as vision and hearing. Okay.
That sounds scary. That sounds very scary.
Longevity risk, he goes on, however, is chief among all the risks because it's a risk multiplier. And this is the point that you have to really be cognizant of. The longer you live, the bigger all those other risks get, don't they? So if it were so simple, if you go back to 1900 and you die at age 60, most of those people didn't have to worry about long-term care because they were 6 feet under.
Well, their long-term care was about a year and a half. When they couldn't work anymore, they went to live with, their kids or something, and they died in bed a year later.
That's right. So looking at various insurance products that satisfy the need, and this is the point that I was making earlier. When we look at like losing a spouse or dying too soon or living too long, insurance is one of the only ways that you can reasonably satisfy or solve for that particular problem. And that's true whether we're talking about annuitized income. You buy insurance to make sure you don't run out of money before you run out of life, right? And you buy insurance in the unlikely event you were to die prematurely. You're in that 50% that either die before age 87, and in that case, a life insurance policy might kick in. Or if you're lucky enough to live beyond your life expectancy, you buy insurance to make sure that you have an income stream that will last as long as you do. This is basic in all financial planning, yet ignored by most financial planners, and it's a dang shame.
Why is it ignored by many?
I'll tell you why. Because over the years, it didn't used to be, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the insurance industry was a classic industry, and that's where most of the financial planners came from,
sure.
right?
Yeah, so that was on their
So
mind.
they had risk management training. Today, it's all about AUM.
Assets under management.
Right, because if I can get your money and put it under management, 70% of the time, I'm getting a raise. I'm getting an increase in my compensation for not having to do that much more, right?
Yes.
So insurance, it usually pays you one time and then you're done, right? So we'll talk more about this on the other side, but stick around. I got a lot more coming your way right here on the Ray Lucia Show. Welcome back, folks. This is the Ray Lucia Show. Every time I hear the song, I think of Sam Kinison.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Good old
he
Sam.
was great. Preacher Sam.
It was also in that movie, was it Major League, I think? Was it not?
Yeah, I think it was
a character
Major
they
League,
called
yeah.
Wild Thing
Yeah,
or
Wild
something.
Thing.
Yeah. Anyway.
Welcome back, the Ray Lucia Show, 844-RAY-SHOW. If you want to chat, this is the hour to call. If you want to get on board, emails at raylucia.com, RAYLUCIA.com. Click on the Ask Ray button. If you email me right now, we'll get to it in the email segment. So we've been talking a little bit about risk management today, and we'll get into the psychology of retirement satisfaction. An interesting study by someone I've also quoted many times on this show, Dr. Michael Fink, CFP, Chief Academic Officer. You see, if you say that fast, it turns
Chief
cheek.
Academic, yes. All right. Chic.
At the American College of Financial Services from Texas Tech. In either event, Steve Vernon, who is an actuary, wrote not too long ago about the loss of a spouse, and he was quoting from the Merrill Lynch Age Wave study titled Widowhood, the loss couples rarely plan for and should. You see, on this program, we're going to bring up the tough stuff that your advisor probably refuses to talk to you about because you don't make much money. There's no AUM involved in risk management. But losing a spouse is by far the hardest thing for married people to do. Here's what Mr. Vernon said. If you need some motivation to take action, consider this. More than 3/4 of people who've lost a spouse said it's the single hardest thing they've ever been through. In addition, half of all such people experienced a household decline in income of 50% or more, and 2/3 said adjusting to this income loss is their top financial concern. Almost 2/3 of those who've lost a spouse said at the beginning of their grief they were overwhelmed with an onslaught of paperwork and didn't know where to start. Now, John, you and I have been talking about your financial advisor providing you with a place to store all of your important documents. We talked about account aggregation as a means of getting all of your accounts centrally located in one place on a computer that's basically locked away on the cloud, and only you and your designees have access to it. This is critically important, and if your advisor doesn't offer this service, I highly suggest you find one that does.
I've heard it said even by my wife, hey, if something happened to you, I wouldn't even know where to log in. I don't even know what accounts we have because she's turned it over to me years ago. It's been my duty to do all that.
Well, I'm going to have a little sit down with y'all, if you know what I'm saying.
We have talked about it, and she understands it, but she says, I don't even know.
She's the principal of a school of higher education, John.
Yes, she is. But she doesn't want to deal with numbers and budget. She does that at school.
So we need to get you on a system where all of this stuff can be stored for your entire financial plan, all of your tax returns, all of your important documents, wills, trusts, all that stuff. And by the way, folks, if you want information on this, then you can get a hold of us. Go to raylucia.com. We don't do it, but we can refer you to someone that actually does this for a living.
Think of somebody who's in their 70s that has 5 or 6, as a 401k, a few IRAs and all that stuff, and they're in required minimum distribution age. Well, and they're single, they die, their heirs inherit an IRA. Maybe they don't know where the account is. They don't know if they've taken an RMD. They don't even know how much is in there.
I've had situations back in the day when I was doing financial planning where people would die. They have life insurance policies and they don't know where they are. They didn't even know they had them. I remember years ago,
yes.
I was sending letters out to MetLife and Prudential and all the major companies saying, by the way, so-and-so, Johnny Dean died, and I'm working with Chris Dean, and she told John to get themselves financially organized, and it was so stressful, he up and died of a heart attack. So do you have a policy? Some guy named John Dean. There's probably 900,000 of them around the country.
Oh yeah. Well, there were 3 of them died yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Right, exactly.
Now, it's and how do you know? Was there an insurance policy on Uncle Charlie or Grandpa or somebody? They don't know.
So there's other things that you need to know because of the Social Security claiming. You know, a widow has the ability to claim Social Security at age 60. There's loss of pension benefits. By the way, on the Social Security side, there's going to be a loss of one or the other Social Security benefits. So how do you plan for that? Well, that's one of the reasons why I am the proud owner of an HP 12C Platinum.
Well, the Platinum, well,
calculator, because it's easy to do present value calculations. My question is, do you have any kind of a plan? Has anybody sat down with you? And I used to like doing it. I put together a whole training program on a yellow tablet once for advisors because I came to the conclusion that this is back, when computers were just coming out.
or even before. I remember it was. I remember that it had a name for it. I can't
The
remember
financial
what it was.
security analysis.
That's what I was going to say. The analyzer, yes, the
Right.
financial security analysis.
Financial security analysis. And I taught
Boy.
advisors to be able to do these calculations on the fly instead of having to send them to their company in the sky somewhere in New York or whatever, and 3 weeks later getting back a plan. Your advisors should be able to do this on the fly. So if you're going to lose $25,000 in Social Security benefits, for the next, 20 potential years.
In other words, your spouse dies. That was income you were counting on.
Yeah. What do you think that's worth? Just a ballpark.
$25,000 a year.
$25,000 a year for the next 20 years.
Well, I mean, it's got to be $500,000.
Yeah, $400,000 or $500,000, depending on, because that's an inflation-adjusted annuity, basically, Social Security.
Well, it is.
Losing one of those benefits is like losing a lot. Now, in my case, my benefit is 3 or 4 times higher than my wife's benefit. So obviously, if we want to replace Social Securities, she would want to have an insurance policy, or I would want to have an insurance policy on her. That's about 1/3 of the insurance policy on me if I wanted to maintain the same lifestyle if she were to die before me. But actuarially speaking, that ain't going to happen.
No, it isn't going to happen. Now, you're a little bit better off if you have if there's a big disparity in Social Security.
Yes.
Because the lower one will always drop off no matter who dies.
That's
the
correct.
problem is when you've got 2 Social Securities that are almost the same.
So we're talking about risk management here. And if you were to identify, you sit down with your financial advisor, and before you start talking about asset allocation and stocks and bonds and options and ETFs and all of that stuff, I know it's hard. It's going to be really hard for your financial advisor. But if they're worth their salt, they're going to ask you some of the tough questions. Like, what plans have you made in the event one or the other of you end up needing home health care or nursing home care or some form of long-term care that incidentally is not covered by Medicare? Nobody wants to talk about that. It's actually, when you're younger and healthier, it's a pretty easy risk to manage. And when you're older, it's next to impossible because you can't qualify for benefits. But there are ways to address it. There are lots of different options, but your advisor has to have the discussion with you, or you with he or she, to manage those risks. So I want you to write down on a yellow tablet, because that's what I like doing, all of the risks that you face in your latter years, and then talk to your advisor about how you can manage them. We'll be back. Welcome back. This is the Ray Lucia Show, helping you to make better money moves with Johnny Dean, the bad boy of radio and television.
Yeah, and by the way, we'll get to a couple of emails coming up here in not too long, probably next segment. I had one that from Orlando who was asking, I think we talked about it earlier in the hour. Hold on, Orlando. It has to do with IUL, Index Universal Life Insurance.
We'll get to that, yeah.
Yes.
And in fact, we have been talking about insurance. We're also going to get to the psychology of retirement income, an interesting study out of Dr. Michael Fink coming up. But I want to finish our thought on this whole business of risk management because I challenged you during the break to write down some of the risks, or at least commit them to memory.
Yes, okay. So there's a risk that these are ones really everybody faces. But let's say a married couple, one of them could die. There's the risk of death, and one of them will
so the
go
first.
first.
So the first thing you got to do is you got to pull out your calculator and say, if you want to make sure she has 50 grand a year for 10 years or whatever at 3%, that's $426,000. If you want to make sure that the mortgage is paid off, there's another $200,000 or $300,000. You probably need $1 million worth of coverage, John Boy.
Right. And so if I'm young and I can afford it, that's fine. But it starts to get costly if I'm thinking about this in my late 50s, early 60s.
You're a cheapskate. But what if it's
Well,
$50 a month? I mean, you can buy term insurance for $50 a month or something, probably for $1 million.
Well, but I mean, maybe I need this to last for longer than a term.
Well, you got to start somewhere, dude.
Well,
Let's go on to the next one because I know I've had this conversation with you before.
All right, so you got the
There's
disability.
death and disability. That's an
right.
important one in long-term care. We've talked about that.
Yes, we have.
You could end up in a nursing home somewhere.
Yes, that could happen, and it could happen anytime.
Outliving your life expectancy. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. We talked about that during the break. How about this one? You could lose your job.
Could happen. Could happen.
And that really is important because we've discussed having emergency funds, and they've become very unpopular when interest rates were so low. But today, they're not as bad. You can put the money in a money market fund or a CD and get a couple of percent. So it's better than a poke in the eye. So having some cash sitting around is good. Having access to cash, like that IUL discussion, that's what I used for years. I used my life insurance policies, and I used a second mortgage, a line of credit on my. You don't like my Diet Mountain Dew sitting on the desk.
I didn't know how to
here.
signal you. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
We use the same studio for radio as we do for television.
We forget sometimes we're on television.
We put the Diet Mountain Dew on the set.
Unless they want to sponsor the show,
it's great. It tears your guts up, and my
but it
wife
keeps
says
you-
it makes you fat because it's fake sugar and all that stuff.
It doesn't make you fat.
But it does replace 14 cups of coffee.
There you go, which I think is better. All right, so you said you use IUL.
Loss of job,
Yes.
getting divorced, all of those. So but the point that I was making, I need to move on. The point that I was making is sit down with your advisor and list all these things out, right? On one side of the sheet, draw a line down the middle, and then list out how you have addressed them. And if there's a goose egg next to it, in other words, you haven't addressed it, get that done before you start talking about asset allocation and stocks and bonds. That's all, because it's way more important. Way more important.
I agree.
Okay, I want to get to this Michael Fink study. Very, very interesting. He's the chief academic officer at the American College of Financial Services. And what he talked about is the mental separation of wealth and income. This is really fascinating, because so many of us strive to be wealthy, but when we get to retirement, wealth has very little to do with it. It's more about how much am I spending? Check this out. So Dr. Fink highlighted that an important distinction exists between wealth and income. People have trouble spending their assets, not spending their income. Once we start viewing money as wealth, as a stock of money and not necessarily as a flow of money, then we seem to get less happiness out of spending it than we do from money that's automatically turned into flow. Now, we kind of knew this intuitively, but now it's been proven out in the science labs all across the country. The data shows an inflection point when individuals have somewhere between $3 million and $4 million saved. Fink explained that people will naturally focus on a number. For example, you want to get to $500,000 by the day that you retire, and it becomes negatively affected when that number decreases, even if it does not decrease until years after retirement. So in other words, people get focused on this number, John. I want to have $1 million when I retire, and then I'll be happy. Well, when it's $999,000, I'm not happy anymore. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
But what's more important is this. People spend income, not assets. That's why this whole idea of I'll liquidate some stocks to live on is bogus, because the studies indicate that you won't. In addition to refocusing individuals' retirement income perspectives, advisors have a variety of investment vehicles and products available to them to turn pools of wealth into guaranteed streams of income. Obviously, Social Security is one of those guaranteed streams of income.
Because it's not coming from a big pile of savings, it's just income.
Defined benefit plans used to be, but now they've been steadily on the decline for the last, say, 25 years. Most companies don't have defined benefit pension plans any longer. Social Security, as I said, he goes on, remains a source of guaranteed income for 97% of the population between the ages of 60 and 89. So what are the strategies for turning assets into guaranteed income? He says build a bond ladder. Now, we've discussed this in the past. When you have a bond ladder, you might have bonds, let's say it's a 10-year bond ladder, and you'll have bonds that mature every year, year 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, all the way out to year 10. And after the first year, you buy a new 10-year bond. After the second year, you buy a new 10-year bond, so that you always have bonds maturing. And that's a decent way for you to create income. So when the bond matures, you can take your income from the bond that is maturing, and you always would have one that's maturing the year after and the year after. Annuities, we've discussed 1,000,000 times on this program. That's probably the easiest thing. I recall a study done by Dr. Wade Pfau on bond ladders versus annuitized income, and it was actually cheaper to fund retirement with an annuity than a bond ladder. Well, that would make sense because of something called mortality credits, right, John? You know what they are.
I know what they are. It's where the insurance company digs into its pocket to keep paying you, grumble, 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 because you live so long.
So the old people get to crib off of the dead people.
Well, dead people don't care. They don't need it, you know. That's the whole point, though.
Here's another thing that happens in real life, and I see it all the time. In fact, I get at least a question or two a month on should I take the annuity from my company or should I take the lump sum?
Oh, yeah.
Now, you need to understand that most of the annuities from the company are based on some actuarial calculation. So they're real live numbers done by actuaries that say if you're 68 years old and you've accumulated $582,000, we'll give you the $582,000, or we'll give you $6,282 a month for the rest of your life. I'm making those numbers up.
Whatever it is, it's different for everybody.
But you must understand that annuity calculation can be skewed one way or the other based on your own personal circumstance. Remember the other day, John, I talked about how certain individuals that are wealthier and healthier can game the system. Those individuals ought to definitely take the annuity because they get the mortality credit benefit, right? If you're going to live longer than the other person in the pool, then you get the benefit of that person dying early. But here's the rub. Most financial planners and advisors say, well, let's take the lump sum because we can invest this money, get 10%, pay you out that $6,000, and we'll have $3,000 or $4,000 left over for inflation or for your heirs or whatever. And what they do not understand is this thing called the sequence of returns risk. When you purchase the company's annuity, and by the way, it's usually not the company's annuity. They de-risk their portfolios more and more today by going to an insurance company. Now, some of them big companies, they basically finance it out of their pocket. They get the actuaries, they tell them how much the annuity would be, and they take the investment risk themselves.
Most don't, though, right?
Most of the really big
Well,
companies.
no, the big companies would, but most companies.
But more and more companies. I read an article the other day where MetLife, I think, said more companies are de-risking because they've done really well. They're not underfunded anymore, and now they want to de-risk and transfer that risk to an insurance company, which is exactly what an annuity does. We'll be back. back, folks. This is the Ray Lucia Show, helping you to make better money moves live on your radio and television nationwide and coast to coast. Emails, raylucia.com. Click on the Ask Ray button. I answer every single one of them, Johnny.
Yeah.
Personally.
Sometimes a little late if I don't get to it on time, so we're going to go right here to Orlando, who's been waiting like an hour for this one.
Well, hit it, fellas. Let's do some emails.
Whoa, yes, wait a minute, Mr.
Postman's out there.
Orlando says, I'm considering an IUL, Index Universal Life.
Yes.
For insurance and retirement savings. Is this a good move? I'm 43, married with 2 kids.
Well, Orlando, it may be and it may not be. And I wish I could give you a little bit better advice. Let me first explain to everybody what's going on here. So an indexed universal life is a permanent life insurance policy where you put money in, you pay a premium. The premium goes toward buying term life insurance and the balance goes into a side fund. The side fund is invested like it would be in, say, an indexed annuity. And the interest that you earn on that side fund would be based upon how well an index like the Standard & Poor's 500 does, with zero downside risk, but some kind of a cap on the upside. Now, I will point out that the caps are in the double-digit returns on an IUL, so they actually will perform a little bit better than most indexed annuities per se. But then there's the expense of the mortality charges and all of that stuff. Now, who are they good for? They're good for individuals who obviously need life insurance, because you don't buy life insurance if you don't need it. They're good for individuals that are in reasonably high income tax brackets, because a life insurance policy grows on a tax deferred basis like a Roth, and you can withdraw your principal tax-free like a Roth, and you can borrow your earnings out tax-free like a Roth. So it's kind of like a Roth IRA with a death benefit, although a little bit more expensive. At your age, Orlando, maybe it cost you 1% over the long time period to have a permanent death benefit. So it's not a bad deal. Now, Johnny, several of them now come with chronic illness or critical care riders, where if it's a $500,000 policy, you may be able to tap into $200,000 or $300,000 of the death benefit tax-free if something emergent happens to you. You lose your health or whatever. There's disability waiver of premiums. But these are complex instruments. They're not right for everybody. But I hearken back to Dr. Fowles' study where he talks about using permanent life insurance along with a life annuity. And this is academically proven out, so everybody ought to at least take a look at this. Not everybody should do it, but everybody should explore it. If you die early, the life insurance takes care of your family. If you live too long, the annuity takes care of you and your family. And the combination of the two of those with a normal stock and bond portfolio for the balance of your allocation actually produced significantly better results for both income and legacy. Don't believe me? I'll be talking about it sometime, probably in the next week or so. It's phenomenal stuff. So Orlando, for you, I can't say, because if you're running tight financially, it doesn't make sense.
If he hasn't maxed out his 401k or his Roth,
obviously,
don't do it.
You need to talk to a financial advisor, because it doesn't make sense for everybody, but it might make sense for you.
Elliot says, I read that index funds are the best way to go, but mine got killed in December. Do you think there is a better way to go?
You know, anytime we start talking about better ways to go and we jump from one to the other, it's usually a mistake. But let's go back a step. An index fund, why is it the best way to go? It's not because there's stellar asset management, because there is no asset management. When you buy an index, you're buying all of the stocks within a certain category, like the Standard & Poor's 500. you get all the big companies in America and you take your chances, right? And they're usually market capitalization weighted, meaning more of your money goes to the bigger companies and less of your money goes to the smaller companies. So they're weighted more toward large. Well, that's panned out pretty well over the last few years with, the Googles and the Facebooks and the Netflix and the technology stocks doing as well as they've done. Amazon, just phenomenal companies. But they also fell pretty hard last year too in many respects. And you've seen a couple of instances where Facebook's, done some things that people don't like, and all of a sudden they get a bad rap and the stock gets creamed. Apple even got creamed, right? So those big companies can make you a lot of money in an index. They can cost you a lot of money. But the reason index funds are so attractive is because they're dirt cheap, because you don't have to pay for a money manager. Now, what would I do? I'm a firm believer in, and I've said this before, I'd rather be 50% right than 100% wrong. I've written about this. There have been instances, maybe 40, 50% of the time, where those top money managers do in fact beat the index. You can look up something called active share. For me, I'd rather have a portfolio that had some index, which is broad diversification, and then some concentration, where maybe there's 10, 15, 20 stocks in a portfolio. Now understand, 20 stocks can be a lot riskier than 500 stocks, but it can also do a better job when the markets are, and those particular companies are in favor. But you're right, Johnny, when the market is tumbling and you own an index fund, you're tumbling along with it.
Well, because you're mirroring in many respects the index. I mean, this is what happens. The index goes down, you're going to go down as well. And as you said, the 50-50 rule or guideline, whatever you want to call it, can mitigate some of that loss somewhat.
Well, here's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is how you behave, because whether index funds do better than active management or active management does better than index funds, hey, I think most of the time you will find that index funds do fine. But the index fund investor is where the problem lies, and he's hinting at that right now, because he's saying, well, you know what, I got killed or creamed?
Killed is a killed.
Yeah, he got killed last year. Well, you and
in
I
December
and
alone.
Everybody else. Yeah, well, we're down like 8-9% in 1 month. So the fact is, Elliot, you need to manage your behavior more than you need to oversight an index fund. And that's where I'll leave it. In the meantime, folks, if you want to email me, go to raylucia.com, RAYLUCIA.com. Click on the Ask Ray button. Now make it a blessed day. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Ray Lucia Show, bringing you the best in money information, answering questions about your biggest financial challenges, talking about your money, your business, and your life. Ray Lucia is not a registered representative of or affiliated with any securities brokerage or investment advisory firm. The views and opinions expressed by Ray and his guests are not necessarily those of this station or its sponsors and should not be construed as legal, tax, or investment advice. You should always consult with the appropriate advisors before making any financial decisions. Ray is available to take your questions online at raylucia.com.